So today's stream is going to be, over the next 2 hours, we're going to be interviewing people across the gaming industry. And for context, our previous stream, our main GamePad event, ended up having to be cut short, and we're kind of we're kind of adding the stuff that we missed, as well as some extra bonus stuff. So it's pretty great that that's coming out of it. And for everyone that doesn't know me yet, my name is Tazziii, and Mayamada is a British manga company that makes these amazing original mangas, and you can see some of the characters around me in the frame. And GamePad is a social event that we like to run. It's now currently online, and it's the idea behind GamePad is that we bring the community together to celebrate the culture that we love from the comfort of your home. And so over the next 2 hours, you can expect an interview with Nigel and the CEO of French games studio Fireplace Games, Aeneas Simone. So thank you to the French Institute for arranging that. We also have me talking live. This will be a live interview with Deborah Mensah-Bonsu, the founder of Games for Good, which focuses on helping studios and industry harness games for social impact. And then we will be ending with Nigel interviewing Des Gale, founder of Games Studio Altered Gene, UK board member, BAFTA Games Committee member, and POC In Play co-founder. And in between that, we will also be celebrating Black History Month by spotlighting historical contributions to games culture and industry. And that is thanks to Gary Swaby of the Koalition. And just a quick note from our sponsor, Into Games, and their project, SideQuest. SideQuest is a bi-weekly game jam with themes set by real UK game studios. It's run by GamePad Online's sponsor, Into Games, a non-profit organisation set up to give young people support and guidance on how to find a rewarding career in the games industry. And to find out more about them and the information on career pathways, you can visit sidequest.org.uk and find out more. You can also join live in chat and on our Discord group throughout the event. You can also reach us on social media at mayamada on Twitter, at mayamadatees on Instagram, and at Tazziii on both.
Hey, what's up? This is Gary Swaby, and I am the co-owner of video games media platform, Koalition.com, and I'm also author of the book Descendant of the Elders, which is sci-fi fantasy adventure. So go check that out. I hope you're enjoying the mayamada stream today. Shouts to Nigel and Tazziii, always doing a great job. And the reason I'm here is because it's Black History Month, and I just wanted to highlight some real important key Black people in the video game industry who have come before us, because now we have organizations like the BCGA and also Melanin Gamers over here in the UK who they basically discuss the topic of representation in the industry, and that's great that we have those today. But back in the day, things were very different, and we had people in the video games industry, Black people who were doing major things, but it was just never talked about, and it's only really starting to kind of get attention now. So I just want to highlight some of these figures who have kind of inspired me even. So the first one I want to highlight is very relevant right now, and that's Mike Pondsmith. So Mike Pondsmith was born into a military family, which meant that he traveled around the world throughout his childhood. You can imagine that feeling of never feeling settled anywhere, because he was always moving. So even if he made a friend, it wouldn't be long before he had to move to another country or something like that. So because of all the time Mike Pondsmith would spend traveling, he developed a very creative mind, and he actually used to create, like, he used to design like his own video games just for fun, like in his mind basically. And it wasn't until he graduated from the University of California he actually learned about this pen and paper game called Dungeons and Dragons, and I'm sure many of you have heard about that. So the thing is, because of the upbringing that Mike Pondsmith had, the medieval fantasy setting didn't really appeal to him because he was more into contemporary ideas of, military and combat, because of all the knowledge he accumulated from his parents and everything. So while he really loved the mechanics of D&D, he actually preferred more of sci-fi themes or modern themes in video games. So from there, his interest in tabletop and pen and paper role-playing games intensified until in 1977 he found a game called Traveller, which was another role-playing game similar to the idea of D&D. But Mike Pondsmith noticed that there were a few personal drawbacks he found within Traveller, and this actually compelled him to create his own tabletop game, pen and paper, called Imperial Star. Mike then spent a few years in the video games industry as a graphic designer, and he would even help to kind of repackage Japanese video games for the Western market. In 1980, the growth of the video game market in particular was actually becoming stagnant, and it was actually about to crash, which is well documented. Because of other jobs Pondsmith had taken in the industry at that time, he had access to, computers and other technology. So using this, he decided to create his very own tabletop game, and that game was called Mechton, which was a mecha-based combat tabletop game inspired by, different manga and anime that he'd seen. Mechton didn't have much actual role-playing. It was more of a tactical war game. To Pondsmith's surprise, the game actually became a success. And this success let Mike know that he needed to take things a step further to create his own dream role-playing game. So in 1988, he published Cyberpunk, the role-playing game of the dark future, for the first time. And it was basically a dystopian tabletop game about, tech megacorporations that fight among each other for dominance. And to be honest, that sounds pretty significant today. Pondsmith would then release a few new iterations of his cyberpunk themed role-playing game throughout the years, including Cyberpunk 2020 and also Cyberpunk Red. And the themes of these games would be licensed by many different entities throughout the 1990s, basically. His work also inspired many writers and filmmakers, and I for one remember reading many cyberpunk type of themed novels. And then in 2012, it was announced that Mike Pondsmith would be teaming up with the Witcher studio CD Projekt to create a brand new iteration of the Cyberpunk franchise. And this time around, it wouldn't exactly be a tabletop game, it would be a full-length interactive experience. And we're going to finally get to experience the results of this next month on the 19th of November. But to this day, many people overlook the fact that Mike Pondsmith was the creator of this series. It all came from his amazing imagination, and his work inspired many other video games, movies, role-playing games, etc. So I definitely wanted to highlight Mike Pondsmith because, I feel like although he's getting a lot of attention now, I feel like, for years, people weren't very aware that, a black figure had such influence within, many different industries actually. So that's it for now. I will be back a little later just to talk about and highlight some other important figures in video game history.
So here I have Deborah, the founder of Games for Good, which focuses on helping studios and industry harness games for social impact, and is currently sitting on her kitchen floor. And she's just moved.
That's correct. It's a good way to lead in. Yeah.
Hello, welcome.
Thanks. Appreciate it. It's nice to be here. Yes, like Tazziii said, I just moved and I have no furniture in my place. So I'm sitting on a pillow on the ground and yeah, I've got my laptop on like some little crate that I used for my shoes. So yeah, it's all good though. Using a hotspot as well, like don't have internet. It's yeah, good. How's everyone?
Make things work. Yeah, I'm doing great, thank you.
Nice.
Hope you're all well.
Yeah, no, really good. Can't complain. It is beautiful in this area that I moved to, so I'm excited.
Oh, lovely.
Nice to be with you guys and all you guys watching as well. Resourceful, yes. True story. You gotta be.
So you're a driving force behind Green Mobile Game Jam, and you consult for the UN Environment Programme Playing for the Planet, and a media professional with a decade of experience in print, TV, and as a producer at Xbox and Space Ape Games. So we're going to go through like different sections of questions. We're going to sort of go through your journey, and then move on to career advice, and then some bonus questions. Yeah.
Cool. Sounds good. I'm excited for these bonus questions.
Yeah.
I'm also older than I look, so at some point I feel like my knees will start to hurt and I'll have to shift and stuff. So when you said like decade of experience, I was like, yes, I am older than I seem.
That's good though. It's fine. When you forget that you have more experience than you realize, it's always a good thing.
Exactly.
More is better.
Sorry, I'll stop rambling now. You go ahead.
Not a problem at all. So yeah, starting with your journey, where did your journey begin? Did you always want to get into games? And was there like any training, like school or other official training like that?
Sure. So my journey into games, probably kind of unconventional, although I think the more people I meet, the more I realize that unconventional is actually the standard. I think sometimes we have this idea of what people in the games industry, like what background they will have had, or the education they will have had, when really I think there's so much just diversity and disciplines and experiences and stuff within the industry. So for me, I'm actually a journalist by background. So I did that for like 6-7 years when I was still living in Canada, hence the accent. I started out in print, and then I did a little bit of radio, and then mostly television. So I was a reporter and producer, researcher, lots of different gigs, wore a lot of different hats. And then at some point I decided I didn't really want to do news journalism anymore. And so I quit, and then I moved to Europe. And I'm German by birth, so I had family in Germany. I hung out with my brother for like a summer and kind of tried to suss out what I wanted to do next. I figured if I wanted to start down a different career path, I might as well also like start my life over somewhere else, rather than staying in Canada. I'd always wanted to live in Europe at some point. And then while I was sort of looking for jobs in London, Berlin, Hamburg, kind of like the big metropolitan cities, I got a call asking if I'd be interested in working at Microsoft in London. And I was like, oh, well, okay, yes, I would. In what? Doing what, And it turns out that they had actually found my CV on Monster. Yes, this happens. And they needed somebody with an editorial background who spoke English, French, and German. And so I started working at Xbox. I think I moved to London within like a span of a couple of weeks or something. And then I started working at Xbox first within like their sports portal sort of division. I'd done some like sports reporting and stuff as well in the past. And then I quickly moved into something called Xbox Upload, which is like the video content editing and sharing platform on the Xbox One. And so then there I was on a team that curated content, created content. So I did, produced content, also did presenting, a lot of community management as well, because Upload back then was all about how we can, foster this community of gamers around the new Xbox One. And so we went to sort of different trade shows, and we'd take community members with us, and they would get to interview the devs and things like that. It was very cool. It was a lot of fun. It was kind of a crash course in gaming. I mean, when it comes to content and storytelling and video production, all that stuff, I did learn a lot on the job as well, but I already had that background, that skill set from journalism. So there's a ton of transferable skills that I took over into gaming. And then I did that for about 2 years, and then our studio closed down, and then I moved to Space Ape Games, which is a mobile dev and publisher based in London. And I started there as a community manager for Germany. And then that quickly sort of parlayed itself into community manager full stop, sort of for all of our different titles. And then I kind of brought the whole idea of like content, video content, live streaming, all of that to Space Ape. And then that became my role. And I think the great thing about working at Space Ape is there is just a lot of freedom, which can be intimidating at first if you're not used to that environment. If you're sort of put in a situation where you have to figure out where the gaps are, just problem solve, figure out what the company needs, and just do it. It's a lot of responsibility, but it's like once you get a taste of that freedom, you kind of never want to go back. So I learned a ton at Space Ape just about being a self-starter and just problem solving and figuring out what is the good next project to do, what will be valuable, etc. So I was at Space Ape for more than 5 years, and I think in the last maybe 2.5, 3 years of being there, I started pushing kind of like for good initiatives at the company, whether it was around student mentoring and education, or around our green initiatives, or fundraising for different causes, things like that. And at some point, I think early this year, I did this event called Games for Good at our studio, where I invited a bunch of different speakers to talk about different ways that they were using games for social impact. And it kind of clicked for me that was all I wanted to do. And so that's kind of where it like solidified for me that was going to be what I did in the future. Because I still had a lot of different tasks and projects and stuff that I was working on Space Ape, which I loved. But I realized I just wanted to focus on this thing. So so I left in like June of this year, and started my own company called Games for Good. And now I consult for different studios and companies within the industry, or who have some kind of partnership with the industry around how we can use our games for social good. And I mean, you mentioned playing for the planet there, so that's one of the initiatives I'm working on, where we're basically trying to harness the power of our incredible reach in games. There's like 2 billion gamers on the planet. If we can leverage that for something good, then that's a huge impact we can have. So that's all around how we can leverage that community for against climate change, and for environmentalism. There's another project I'm working on where I think the game itself is kind of a game for good because of the subject matter that it covers and the way that it tries to tell a story. I still consult for Space Ape as well, so I work on their CSR initiatives. I'm really involved with their green agenda as well. So they're kind of, I think I see them as like a leader in environmentalism within the games industry, just because they're not afraid to try things and get stuff wrong and learn and grow. So yeah, man, I've talked a lot. That is my current journey.
Yeah. No, that's great. Talking a lot is kind of the point.
Yeah, I guess so. But at some point, Ivana says the Games for Good event was phenomenal. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And also another comment from Fresh Richie, trilingual movements, inspiring. your journey does sound so interesting, and it's funny that you commented on the conventional getting into games, because we interview a lot of people through mayamada, and mainly on our podcast Story X Story. And I feel like whenever we interview someone, I mean anyone we interview, whether they're in games or any of the other creative industries, it's always like, oh yeah, it's just a super unconventional way of getting into a game. And I think we've lost you. You're frozen. Can we? I think we're going to have a technical issue here. But yeah, give us a second while we see what's going on here.
What's up everyone, this is Gary Swaby and I'm back again to give a brief history on another important figure in gaming history. And this time around I'm going to highlight a man called Ed Smith. Edward Lee Smith was born in Brooklyn, New York in 1954. His parents had moved up from Mississippi to flee from the Jim Crow era, which was a very oppressive time for black people back then. Ed Smith would grow up in the ghettos of Brownsville, Brooklyn, and at that time there wasn't a lot of hope to kind of get out of, the ghetto and that oppressed state that was in the city at that time, in those lower income parts. But that never stopped Ed Smith from having bigger aspirations for himself. Actually, when Ed was a young man, his dad would tell him that he should get his driving license so that he could become a chauffeur or a truck driver, because he didn't see him doing anything other than that. But Ed Smith wouldn't let that suppress his own, dreams and aspirations. Now, Ed was very curious as a young man. Like, he would take, any gadget he could find, whether it was a radio or, calculator or, any electrical gadget, a toaster, an iron, and he would take it apart because he was interested to see how it actually worked. And this eventually led to him doing favors around the neighborhood, where he would offer to fix people's gadgets and electronics. When Ed was older, he took a manufacturing job where he would work on traffic signals, which are, the traffic lights, and he would actually learn about microprocessors, and he would be sent on, courses to kind of learn more about these things and how they work and how they're able to program different things. And, this was basically the kind of technology that would help switch the lights, like so the traffic systems would know when the light is switched and everything. So Ed Smith found himself in Manhattan, where he was taking his classes, and he would see the big shot Wall Street brokers and everything, and he would appreciate how clean cut they were, and this gave him bigger aspirations. So he actually went to a job agency in Manhattan, and he ended up landing a role at a company called APF. And APF at the time were basically manufacturing calculators, advanced calculators. But during this time, APF was watching what was happening on the other side of the country in California. And over there, Atari was actually making waves in the video game market. Consumer electronics were becoming a big thing back then. And arcade games like Pong were being made available for home systems now, which was a big deal because Pong was a huge arcade game at first. So this led to Ed Smith and APF eventually working on what would be known as the MP1000. So Ed used everything he'd learned about microprocessors to design and develop the MP1000 console. And bear in mind, Ed was like the main guy designing and developing this thing, and he, like, the amount of work he was doing to manufacture this console at the time is the kind of work that is allocated to hundreds of people nowadays in today's video game market, because obviously it is more advanced today, but still this is amazing that back then this guy was doing all of this work to create this, MP1000 console. And the system allowed users to buy multiple cartridges to swap games, but it wasn't the first console to do this, and I'm actually going to get back to that later. So the MP1000 system launched in 1978, but by that time Atari was kind of owning the market with the Atari VCS system. And this kind of, hurt the success of the MP1000 system. But during this time also there was a shift occurring, and while video games consoles was still, a hit to younger audiences, in the wider tech world, the home computer was becoming a big deal. So do you know what Ed Smith did then? He decided to fuse these ideas, and he used the core of the MP1000 and created the Imagination Machine. This machine was a combination of the video game, console, and home computer. So yes, Ed Smith made one of the first gaming PCs. It had a full-size typewriter, and it could also, accept cassettes so that you could save data and everything. And you could even plug in a controller. So like, if you could type documents with the typewriter, or you could use the controller to play a game. Very much like what we have today, but back then. But Ed Smith wasn't just the designer and the developer of this system. He would also be a marketing guy, and he would go to, big, owners of department stores like Sears and pitch the system. He would give full pictures, and they were very captivating, and people really got behind the idea of the Imagination Machine. But unfortunately, creating this kind of tech and R&D back then was very expensive, and APF actually, went out of business because they could no longer, pump money into the system. And, other companies like Apple and Atari were just, they were just too successful at that time. Like, they had the full market share. Atari had the video games market, and Apple kind of owned, like, they were innovating the most in the home computer field back then, But the important thing to take away from Ed Smith's story is that, no matter how much you feel held back and how much you feel like, there's a ceiling above you and you can't rise any higher than that ceiling, if you just have the drive, the curiosity, and, the passion, and, the ambition and the drive for success, you can meet any expectation that you have for yourself, no matter what it is. You just have to have those things. And Ed Smith had all of those things. So that was Ed Smith's story, but I will be back once again to give, another account of another, important black figure in video games history. So see you in a little while.
But yeah, it's funny, we interview a lot of people, and everyone's always like, it's this very unconventional way of getting. And Deborah's story there, I feel like it flows a lot better. Not better, that's the wrong word. But there seem to be more links than a lot of the time we hear. But it just goes to show, if anyone's listening that wants to get into the games industry, whether you've already had another career, and you're looking to get into the games industry or any creative industry, it's never like you need official training to get into that industry. It is you bring your skills to your new role, and it's funny because the game industry is still so young, right? I think we have Deborah back now. Hello.
Hello?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, cool. Oh, my camera's on. Okay, hold on.
It's not a stream without a little technical issue.
No, of course not. It's got to be that way.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I was just telling Stream while you were absent that it seems like often there's not really a conventional way of getting into games. It's not like you go to, I mean, there are ways you can sort of go to games school, like learn specifically for games, but where the industry is still so young, the unconventional is kind of actually the conventional, right?
Yeah, that's kind of the way I see it as well. And when I was still at Space Ape, like we did something called Space Ape Varsity, which was like a series of lectures about different disciplines within the games industry, and we partnered with a couple universities to put them on. And one of the in one of the semesters that we did it, our whole focus was on unconventional paths into the industry, because I was working with so many people, you know, who had like really different backgrounds to what they were doing now. So there's someone who used to work in finance, who was like a game lead, someone who used to be an air hostess, who then, you know, started doing our social media, or, you know, somebody went from starting in QA and then becoming a game lead, or like there's so many different ways. So I don't think there's a right or a wrong way.
Definitely. And so obviously you didn't go to school or get any training specifically to go into the games industry, but what sort of main skills did you bring over from sort of like what you've learned before in your previous profession, and bringing into I forgot the word for it then. I was like, what? Into games. Yeah, what are some sort of like key skills you brought over into games?
Yeah, I think one is that, I guess, storytelling aspect. I think I've always been, you know, a writer, a storyteller, working a lot in content, understanding what good looks like when it comes to content. So I think that was sort of one of the main skill sets, I guess, I brought over. But also, like, when you're working as a reporter or as a journalist, you tend to have to become an expert in something like very quickly. You know, you'll have like a day to turn around a story. And I think that like adaptability is also really useful in games, because, you know, our industry changes so quickly, and like the tech within it changes so quickly. The way that we make games and share games, etc., it's all changing all the time. So I think being able to roll with the punches was something that was super useful, and just being able to learn quickly, you know, pick things up quickly. And I think there's, when it comes to like community management and stuff, I think you have to be kind of a people person and try to understand different perspectives and put yourself in other people's shoes. And I think that's probably also something I picked up when I was working in journalism, to try to see things, you know, objectively and from different viewpoints and stuff, which I think really helps when you're working with a community that has opinions and loud voices and needs. And then you've got developers on another side that have all those same things, right? And trying to balance that and be the bridge there. I think is key.
So
trying to think what else I brought over. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say it's definitely a key skill needed in the games industry. We've all been on Twitter, so we definitely see that bridge that needs to be made and upheld between the consumers and the amazing teams behind bringing those to us.
Yeah, no, I think definitely.
Yeah. And so Games for Good, obviously you've sort of told us how that all started and what really pushed you towards that. And I just want to know, like, for you personally, why is it so important that games make a social impact?
Yeah, I think it would just be such a wasted opportunity if we didn't use this medium for something more than entertainment. And it doesn't mean that it can't be entertaining. You know, I think, of course, you know, people play games for fun, and I think that's wonderful. I just think that the same way that books, music, and film also do the same, I think games can do that too. You know, I think I guess any creative medium, you know, it helps us to figure out what it means to be human, how to connect with each other, how to care about things more deeply, how to see other perspectives, like how to grow as individuals. Like, I think there's so much that, any creative medium can bring to the table. So it would be such a wasted opportunity if we didn't try to do the same with games. And just like I mentioned before, like the reach of games is incredible, and the way that you can reach people is very different to other mediums. You know, whereas when you're watching a film, it's like, yes, you're engaged, but it's more of a passive activity. Whereas when you're playing a game, like you really put yourself in the shoes of that character, or like you really yeah, you're like a part of that experience versus watching it passively. So I think just the way that you can, yeah, like reach people on a completely different level is key. And I think like the sky's the limit when you're looking at games for the way that they can speak to people.
Definitely. They're so immersive, and like you said, there's all the other mediums we use to make different social impacts and educate people and feel different things. And I feel like so far video games have mainly been on the entertainment factor, and there's definitely so much more room.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are tons of wonderful games out there as well. Like maybe, and I always think, there's room for like the blockbusters as well, right? Like even when you're watching a film, like yes, you're going to watch the Avengers, but then you might also watch, like that indie, or you might watch that other film that has something else to say. So it's not like there's not space for everything. I just think that, yeah, we need to be thinking more about how we can leverage this medium.
Definitely, and so many platforms where we can reach people. And so in the time that you have been in the industry, what has improved and what still needs work? This can be either technical or otherwise.
I don't think you want me speaking on technical issues. What's hilarious, actually, as much as I am like not a tech wizard at all, I think my role within games has been like so intertwined with tech, even though, I've been on like the marketing side or the community management side, etc. I'm not the one building the games myself, but or coding the games. But I've had to do so much when it comes to like live streams or learning tech when it comes to video and stuff. So it's just funny that even though I'm not technical at all, I always seem to have to, overcome that somehow. But anyways, that wasn't a real answer. I totally forgot the question.
It was what has improved in your time in the industry?
Oh, sorry. What has improved?
And what still needs work?
Yeah. See what happens. I think what's improved over time. I really do think that people are waking up to like the power that games can have, and that we need different people telling the stories. I think there's been just like a huge surge of acknowledging that fact, and people actually trying to make strides to change that. So I think that is great. Obviously, I don't think we've arrived yet. When you're looking at how many women are in the industry, how many minorities are in the industry, like that still leaves a lot to be desired. So I think we can and have to do more. Also for gamers to be able to see themselves represented, or just for young people to see themselves in the industry and say like, oh, okay, maybe that is something that I can do. It's hard to imagine yourself somewhere when you just don't see anyone like yourself there. So I think we have, a long way to go on that. There's tons around, unfortunately, sexual harassment and gender pay gaps and all of that, which is also coming to the forefront. Games is kind of having its own Me Too movement. But I do think like change is possible, and I think I was speaking to Kate Edwards, who like works exclusively in sort of that space as well, like using games for change and as a vehicle for change. And she was saying like change doesn't have to be slow. Like change can actually be quick when you decide that it's going to change. Like if the right people decide it's going to change, it's going to change. So and I really believe that too. I don't think it has to take another decade for things to look different. So I think for me, what's changed for me within the industry, I guess I'm a lot more confident in the space than I was when I came in, which is like, of course, of course that would happen. I think I used to, deal a lot more with the idea of like imposter syndrome when I first started. and not feeling good enough, or not feeling like I belonged, or not thinking that I don't have the right skill sets or the right background, whatever it might be. And you kind of realize as you go on that none of that is true. And now I think when the idea of imposter syndrome kind of tries to get at me, I just kind of see it as a signal that I'm challenging myself in some way, or that I'm growing. Because of course you're going to feel uncomfortable if you're in an arena that you haven't been in before, or if you're taking on something new that you haven't before. So yeah, to me now, imposter syndrome is like, ooh, there's a risk being taken. That's exciting, you know, rather than you can't do this. It's more like, okay, you can probably do it, but this is new. Like so it's more of an exciting feeling now, which is nice.
So that kind of leads us on to like career advice, because definitely imposter syndrome is something that I think we all deal with at some point. Definitely as a streamer, it's like every day. And so I did talk about earlier some of the skills that you've had to use. Is there any skills that you didn't expect that you would need?
That's a good question. Skills that I didn't expect that I would need.
We like to make difficult questions here.
Yeah, that's a really hard question, because I'm trying to think like, where have I been really stumped? And like I've been stumped tons of times. I mean, I think on like the technical side is definitely one. Not like I didn't think the games industry was technical, like of course, but for me myself to have to be technical, I probably didn't anticipate that. But I think the fact that I like to always learn new stuff, it didn't really phase me. And oh gosh, we've had so many live streams at Space Ape where like the audio failed or something failed. So it's all part of the live experience, you know. But I think what I didn't expect is how useful my skill sets would be, and how how successful I could be in this industry, you know, not having grown up a gamer for all intents and purposes. And I think there's so many people who can add value to this industry who have come from different paths, but bring a new perspective. And you know, there's so much being done as well with like video games and film kind of merging, and you have all these people who used to work in film or in TV starting to come into the industry, and like, what's that going to do? And you know, I think that's just really exciting to have just different disciplines come into the industry that are not just all one way. So I think that's super cool. I don't think I really answered your question at all. It's such a hard one. Oh my gosh.
You dropped some knowledge still, even when you're not answering our question directly. I feel like you're answering another question. So
it's like a politician, right? I'll just answer my own questions. I've got like a message track. Horrible.
We're still getting some great insight into the games industry, and a little bit of career advice and a lot on your journey there, which was, I mean, trickled with career advice anyway. You have covered kind of like all the questions in that area that we had. So we're going to go to some bonus questions.
Okay.
Which are more like focused on you and your relationship with games. So why is storytelling in games important to you, and what are some of your favorite video game stories?
I just thought of one thing for your last question. Something that I didn't anticipate, and this is also like career advice for you guys out there. Like, I didn't anticipate how important and valuable it is just to like be you, and that no one else is going to be able to bring exactly what you bring, and that is enough, and that is good, and that is valuable. And you should never try to like be someone you're not, or try to, you know, conform to a way that you think you should be to fit in to the industry in some way. Like, your unique, specific voice is super important and will be valued. And that's something I learned, I think, throughout sort of my journey, and I'm confident of now, but wasn't when I first started. So anyone watching who's like, oh, but I don't know, like, that is really important. You know, there's only one of you, so don't try to be someone else. Right, on to your other, sound like an after school special. I've got one other piece of advice, but I'll save it for the end. And storytelling in games, sorry. I think storytelling in games is huge and is wonderful. And like I said, like the way that you can engage with games is really different. Especially, you know, in narrative games, like you have the option often to like influence the character's choices and like what that says about you and about your own sort of life on the inside, I think is really interesting. It's kind of like holding a mirror back at yourself when you're choosing those different paths and making those different choices. So I think for that reason, really interesting. I think maybe I love the narrative game. I love Life is Strange. Just I'm trying to think like what did I really love about it, but I don't know, it just captured that, you know, that teenage best friendship so well. And I think sometimes games don't have to do like everything well, but if they can like capture a feeling or a moment or something that you can relate to really well in their storytelling, like that's magic. So I love that game for that reason. And one of the titles I'm working on now is also a narrative game that I'm super, super excited about, called As Dusk Falls. And the writing in it is great, and the characters are all like complex and multifaceted and have shades of gray, you know. And I think this is super interesting when you're playing a game that nothing's like one way, that you can see different perspectives there. Yeah.
Definitely. And so this is kind of related to our October community poll. And considering you worked at Xbox, is it fair to ask which next-gen console you're getting on launch?
It's funny. I'm not sure I'm going to get any next-gen console. I'm going to turn my screen, and then right there, you're going to see that's my trusty Xbox One. Which I have yet to set up, but it's there and it's still going to work. So, you know, do I need to buy a new console now? But that being said, I love the Xbox Series S, like that sleek little white thing. I think my, like my inner just like, ooh, nice things is like, that's the one I would get.
I totally agree.
Sorry, you want a PlayStation. Yeah. You know what? I think I am biased though, because I started with Xbox, you know, and I was around like when it shipped, and that was really exciting. So I think I'm very biased when it comes to my consoles.
That's absolutely fine. No, there's no need to apologize. Like, I love both consoles, but I am more of an Xbox fan now, which wasn't always the case. They converted me. Like, I don't need a new Xbox because like it all works. I've got Game Pass. I'm good. But look at seeing them and like seeing people them in like everyone that's got the early release consoles, like just sitting there and they're using them. I'm like, oh, those look nice.
Yeah. No, they're very pretty. I think for someone who works in tech, I'm a bit of like an old soul in a way. Like you can see my phone. That's the case on it, you know, like it's very like it's a phone, I swear, but like it's very, I don't know, I'm a bit like retro.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much for all your like little tips and your insight into your journey and the industry and what you're aiming to do with Games for Good. It all sounds wonderful. I've taken away a lot of advice from that, so I'm personally grateful. So if no one else takes anything away from that, I did. So yeah.
Thanks.
But yeah, it was great having you. So we're now going to go into some community videos, as well as our last interview, which is not live. Thank you so much.
Cool. Thank you so much, guys. Appreciate it. Bye.
Hello, everyone. I hope you're enjoying the mayamada stream today. So I'm Gary Swaby, and I'm here back again for another important story in video game history. This one is kind of very near and dear to my heart because, me and ABF Creative are actually working on a mini-series about the life of this person, and that person is Jerry Lawson. Jerry Lawson grew up in Jamaica, Queens, 40 projects, and this is actually the same area that people like 50 Cent are from. His father was a dock worker and his mother was a teacher. And because his mother was a teacher, she would always ensure that Jerry had, the best teachers, the best education he could possibly have as a young man, because she wanted to make sure he had teachers who would kind of motivate him instead of, making him feel like a lesser person, for obvious reasons. So Jerry used to actually say at school that he wanted to be like George Washington Carver, who was another famed black inventor. And the teacher he had at that time encouraged him and said that you could very much be as great as George Washington Carver was. So Jerry took a very early interest in electronics, and he would, take apart household appliances and things just to see how they worked. He was very curious-minded. And this led to him actually, repairing people's TVs and radios and toasters and things of that nature in the neighborhood. And at the young age of 13, Jerry Lawson actually obtained an amateur radio license. And he, with this license, he would broadcast radio from his bedroom, hanging antennas out the window and everything like that. And he would, at that young age, he had this much interest in technology to where he could set up his own amateur radio station from his bedroom. Jerry would later attend the City College of New York, and this actually led to him deciding that he wanted to get straight into his work career. And this is how Jerry knew his stuff, because this guy at a young age was working on advanced military technology, such as, he was working with Federal Electronics, and he would work on military aircraft UI systems. So he did this for a few years and he enjoyed it, but he decided to venture out to the west coast of America, California. And it was here when Jerry would kind of work with semiconductor-based companies, and this stuff was kind of like second nature to him at that time. And he'd eventually join a company called Fairchild Semiconductor, who owned their own microprocessor called the F8, which rivaled Intel at the time. And while working there, Jerry became one of 2 African Americans who joined the Homebrew Computer Club. This computer club has significance because, people like Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak are documented as being a part of this club also. And during this time, Jerry met a man named Al Alcorn. Al Alcorn was the creator of Pong, the arcade game at the time. Intrigued by what Al Alcorn did with Pong, Jerry Lawson actually built his own arcade machine, his own arcade game in his home garage. Now you have to understand what I'm saying here. The man built his own arcade machine from the ground up in his garage and created a video game on that arcade machine. And that video game was Demolition Derby. Demolition Derby got a lot of local popularity among different arcade spots at the time. And because of what Jerry did, his employer Fairchild was actually worried that Jerry was building this system to compete directly with them. But when they learned that Jerry did this only because he was interested in this stuff, Fairchild saw an opportunity. Now, because of what Atari was doing at the time, and there were a few other video game consoles that were on the market at the time, Fairchild wanted to actually open their own video game department, and Jerry Lawson was then promoted, and he became the very first black chief hardware engineer in video games. So he was the first black person to basically own a video games department, in the industry. So in this department, Jerry hired a lot of great talent, and he motivated many people. And, with their hard work, they created the Fairchild Channel F console. And this console is significant because it is the very first console to feature game cartridges that could be inserted and taken out of the system, so you could change the video game that you want to play. This was the first system to officially release with this technology, and Jerry helped spearhead this technology along with his team. Atari would then come out with a cartridge-based system a year later, and that was the Atari VCS system, which was later changed to the Atari 2600. Fairchild lacked the funds to compete with Atari, so their success kind of died down. They had a whole year of decent sales, but when the Atari came out, they just had too much marketing and too much momentum, and because of that, the Fairchild kind of struggled. So because the Fairchild Channel F kind of fizzled out, and Atari was well recognized at that time, and they're well remembered even today, the Fairchild Channel F kind of goes unnoticed, even though it was the first cartridge-based system. And as a result of that, Jerry Lawson also, his legend kind of never got spoken of until recently. Jerry did many wonderful things, and I feel like everyone should take the time to go up and read up on his history. And as I said, we're also working on a mini series about the man himself. So I hope you enjoyed all this education about black figures in gaming history today. If you want more of this type of content, definitely hit up Mayamada, Melanin Gamers, and thekoalition.com. This is Gary Swaby signing out. I hope you guys enjoy your day, and I hope you enjoy the stream.
Thank you everyone for joining us today on the live stream. And we've had a pleasure showing off all the interviews that we've had today, including our live interview. Thank you to Aeneas and the French Cultural Institute in London. Thanks to Deborah and Des, Gary and Yuki for supporting GamePad. And thank you to Into Games for sponsoring the GamePad events. So we do have some future GamePad plans to announce for you. So coming up, we have all the autumn GamePad online interviews available on our YouTube channel. So we have Rhianna McKeith, an interview with Oliver Weingarten, the Aeneas Simone and Des Gale interviews will also be on our YouTube channel. We also have an interview with Michael Schmidt on the neuroscience behind video games. And that is also available on Twitch VOD and will be available on YouTube on the 29th, in case you did miss it. Our EGX digital panel on storytelling in video games is also premiering on our YouTube channel this month. That was with myself, Nigel, and host Mr. Midas, and narrative designer Brendan Gibbons. And also, you can check out our Story X Story podcast. We launched an episode on next gen consoles, and we'll be dropping that new episode on Thursday. We've got so much going on, honestly. Make sure you're following us to keep track of all of this. We are launching new activities as part of our Discord community. It includes interviews, panels, games night, quizzes, loads of fun stuff. Over on Discord, You should be able to find some links in the chat. And more updates. We are launching the GamePad membership for access to all of the activities I just mentioned, as well as some exclusive content and even more activities. You can also check out our manga and merchandise on the website, and that is including our latest manga Hot Lunch Volume 1. We do also have our final event of the year. It will be a live end of year podcast event. We'll be recapping our favourite stories of the year, as well as inviting past guests to talk about the process of making the new series, the new manga Sirius Through the Fog. And again, thank you so much for watching us. Make sure you are following us here on Twitch if you're not already, as well as you can follow us on our Twitter, which is at mayamada, also at mayamada on Instagram, and you can follow me at Tazziii on both. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you on our next stream.